All right. Well, just before we went to air, Fed Chair Jerome Powell took to the microphone and announced what we expected him to announce is a 0.75% interest rate hike. That's 75 basis points. Feels like years ago that the rate was at zero, but it was just less than a year ago.
No, now this is the third straight time that this is a 75% basis points increase this year in 2022.
And there are two more meetings left.
Oh, great.
And it is expected that it will jump by 0.75 both times. So that leaves us with a much higher interest rate. And the Fed chair took questions from reporters about, okay, do you think this is going to help? How much longer should we tell people to hold on? What do you think? Their estimates are that by making these two big leaps by the end of the year, well, three more, one this week and then two more, that by 2023, we will be at a 3% interest rate rather than the 8% interest rate that we've got. So it begs the question, why is the White House acting like there's no inflation when the Federal Reserve is pulling their hair out to deal with inflation?
Right, taking emergency measures basically to deal with inflation. Because it's bad politics. You know, you're heading into an election cycle and President Biden is, hoping that he won't get walloped in the midterm elections. It really is, I'm sorry, hard to believe that we are only just about halfway through the Biden presidency, the Biden first term presidency. Like, we haven't even had midterms yet to deal with. Can you imagine? Like, oh my God, we still have a month.
Why would we put our faith in an organization like the Federal Reserve that has devalued the dollar since the 70s down, 80% by now or something like that? And we keep putting our faith that they're going to fix this?
Right.
They just put Band-Aids on it every time.
And they are unelected, but 19 out of 19 voted for this interest rate. They have not had a unanimous vote this year when they have been increasing rates, mostly because those of them on the board feel that either the rates have been too aggressive or not aggressive enough. But they unanimously agree that rates have to jump from zero. And now how much we jump, how much we leap is, I guess, debatable. But they feel like this is aggressive and is necessary. The stock market seems to agree with them. The stock market is up. And the stock market was up on this news. It was interesting because last time there was an increase, the stock market was up on the news that there would be an increase and then down on the actual increase.
Well, I don't know what charts you were looking at because literally here, let's put the markets chart up here on the screen. This is what happened right after Powell's announcement, the Dow, at 2 p.m. when he spoke. So it plummeted significantly this afternoon. And then by the end of the day, it's up. So everyone in this, they were all watching. The NASDAQ was down, the Dow was down, the S&P was down. They were all down temporarily on this news. They were all sort of watching to see, is there a hint of positivity in his voice? How is he? This is what they look at. Is there a hint of positivity in his voice going forward? We're really hanging on every word of an unelected group of criminals, if you really think about it, right? That print $8 trillion and dump it on top of an economy. And of course, a lot of this pain is reflected in the fact that they've pulled back on this extra money going to businesses, right? So you're seeing now, of course, that all of those companies that, built new factories, or Peloton, built their new whatever warehouse. Amazon built extra warehouses. And now they're having to close those warehouses. Peloton closing down because they had all this extra money that they just invested and bought all this land and built extra warehouses and factories. And guess what? People aren't buying the $3,000 Peloton bike.
Well, they did announce the Peloton Row today, and I wanted to talk to you about this to see if we need that, because I've been a Peloton user for 5 years. So
Stop. You're the one. All right. So they also cut.
I'm real quick. I'm no economist. I am no economist whatsoever. But to me, it makes zero sense that they take our money, okay, the money that we provide them, and they loan it out to these businesses and banks at 0%. Then they turn around and loan it out to us at up to 25, 30%. Why don't they reverse that? It's like, if you have bad credit, they max out your interest rates. Why don't they give us the 2%, 1% interest rates and charge those big businesses 30% loans and stuff like that and make them pay back? because they're the ones that have it. We don't have it. So it's like this whole system is completely like upside down. And like I said, I'm not an economist, but that seems like that would make more sense to me.
Well, they're borrowing so much of this money from these large institutions, though, right? They borrow the money from China, but they're also borrowing it from a lot of these like institutions. So the government itself is not necessarily getting the money from us at the Federal Reserve level. They're getting it from these big companies and banks. And so in many ways, they're borrowing the money, then giving it back to them for free, and then now they're in debt to. I mean, it makes no sense. It's literally madness. Like if you had to sit down and figure out like how in the world are they actually coming up with this money, it's total madness. It makes no sense at all to how you would run your own family.
And he was not pressed in the press conference on, well, what about spending? What about government spending? I didn't hear very many of the reporters what they stood up. And I will admit that I was doing math homework with my middle daughter, but I was listening to it and I was like, somebody press him on government spending, please. And it was, when can the average American expect to have better gas prices? How much longer do you think this will take? It was mostly about spending pattern of Americans, as if that is the problem. It's you and me, right? It's not government spending.
Right.
Well, and I was just going to say, like, what I was trying to point out is like none of that money ends up back in our economy is the whole point. Like the only money that's flowing through the economy is the money that we have, and all the money that they're borrowing, they don't put it back in, they hoard it.
Yeah. And, or they don't, I don't know what they're doing with it because it's not even real money to begin with. I mean, they're not putting it, backing it with any real currency. There's a lot of speculation today. So, I mean, they cut growth estimates also for 2022 and into 2023. This is, of course, a big marker. So where's the economy going to go? There was a lot of speculation today that they would raise rates by 100%, 100 basis points. Chief economist Peter Schiff, one of the only people that I trust on this topic, says that even if they did raise it 100 basis points, it wouldn't have mattered because it's too late. He says we are heading for a massive recession.
Even if they did, it would not matter. You know, I don't understand why markets are still surprised when you get higher than expected inflation numbers. Inflation is going to continue to get stronger even as the economy gets weaker. And in fact, the Fed actually falls further behind the inflation curve every time it hikes rates because these rate hikes are too little too late. The Fed needs to make interest rates positive to do anything to bend the curve. They have to get rates above the rate of inflation. And until they do that, they're spitting in the wind. And meanwhile, what really has to happen is we need massive cuts in government spending, and the government is doing the opposite. We had the Inflation Reduction Act, we had the CHIPS Act, we have forgiving student loans. All of this is additional spending, which is the worst thing you want to do when you have an inflation problem.
Biden was expected to announce a $2.9 billion fund aimed at mitigating global food insecurity, in part driven by a 7-month Ukrainian conflict. Now it looks like the printing of the money is going to be much, much higher. He announced this today that, no, forget that number. We're just going to keep printing money. Keep printing money. Listen.
We're also taking down the food crisis head on, with as many as 193 million people around the world experience acute food insecurity, a jump of 40 million in a year. Today I'm announcing another $2.9 billion in U.S. support for life-saving humanitarian and food security assistance for this year alone.
And then more coming next year.
You know, I find that really unconscionable when he's holding money that belongs to the Afghani government while people are starving there.
Yeah. Talk about global food insecurity. Here's how we create that. Yeah. We steal your money.
We don't care. We care about it a lot all over the planet. Not you, Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. We don't care about your starving. We're going to hold your money right here while you starve. Everyone else, though, we care a little bit.
I mean, and talk about the hypocrisy of this, too. Like, we created the global food insecurity issue, like by what you've done with your global reset agenda and voting with these World Economic Forum bozos and putting in all of these ridiculous ESG regulations that have, obviously slammed on regulations for farmers, driven these farmers out of business, and put on these ridiculous sanctions against Russia. And so it's a man-made crisis. And now you're going to throw billions of dollars at it? How about you just roll back your ridiculous regulations? There's an idea for you. Peter Schiff is right. He said, they're going to go on printing money. And he said, we are just at the start of this mess. He says, this is not 1980. This is 1970. He said, basically, this is the beginning of this nightmare. Listen.
You mentioned that gold is down, and the reason that it's down is because investors still don't understand that the Fed is going to lose this fight with inflation, that the economy is not only already in a recession, but headed towards another financial crisis. And so the Fed, despite rising inflation, is ultimately going to try to stimulate the economy. And so we're going to have the combination of a massive recession or depression with a financial crisis and rising inflation. So all of this is bullish for gold, it's bearish for the dollar. So my advice is to your viewers is to tune out all the noise about how the Fed is going to succeed and how it's going to bring inflation back down to 2%. And you better invest as if the Fed is going to fail, not succeed. This is not 1980. Powell is not Paul Volcker. You've got to do the opposite of what worked during the 1980s. You got to do what worked in the 70s, and that is getting out of U.S. stocks, getting out of U.S. bonds, and getting into commodities, foreign assets, and gold.
That's right. You have anything to say about that?
No, he's my new favorite because that's exactly how I feel too, and it's scary.
Yeah.
And the Fed, right? Isn't that what Paul said? And the Fed.
Yeah. Look at gas.
What good have they done our economy?
And look at gas prices.
Yeah. Gas prices after 99 straight down days, and despite a record 3-week drain, U.S. gas prices at the pump still are going up. This was predicted by most economists that the temporary drop in prices was a blip. We'll see if that happens. Now, in the UK, they were set to also raise interest rates recently, and the government there decided to wait until after the 10 days of mourning and the Queen's funeral. So we are waiting to see if other Western countries will do the same thing. The European Union has also been increasing interest rates. So we see these countries sort of, mirror and matching these same strategies. And they are experiencing the same inflationary pressure.
Yeah, that's right.